Talking about how the offense doesn't perform early is one thing. Talking about why it doesn't, that's a little less comfortable. Good morning to you. Good Wednesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also happen to cover the Penguins and Pirates and offer daily shots on those teams as well. The Steelers have played 13 games now. They've won 10 of them to their inestimable credit, and I really mean that. And at the same time, in all 13 of those games, they have failed to score a touchdown on the opening possession. In fact, as convenient and concise as that little factoid is, they've actually been worse than that, because it's not just the first possession. It's the second possession. It's often the third. It's the whole quarter, really. It's the whole first quarter. Now, I can live with that if I think the Steelers just aren't very good offensively. I can live with that. I can say, hey, listen, this is just the team that you've got. This is the circumstance that you've got. You've got yourself a terrific defense. You've got yourself superlative special teams. Just deal with this. Work around it. But you know, and I know, that's not the case. You know that they've got the people to get it done. You know they've got the brains to get it done, because there's talent on the field, and Arthur Smith has shown himself to be pretty good at play calling at certain points, usually later in the game. And without exonerating the players involved, because I've also got no doubt whatsoever that the players themselves are performing at a higher level as the game goes along, I feel it's fair on this subject to focus on the coaching. First and foremost, on Mike Tomlin, not because he's at the top or he's the easiest target, which he always is for anything negative, but rather because it's his focus and his emphasis on late game situations that I think contributes to this. I've mentioned this in the past on this program, and it isn't always received very well. Like, what do you mean? That sounds ridiculous. Why would he say something like that or think something like that? And then yesterday, he just flat out said it. Whenever he was asked by Chris Halleck of DK Pittsburgh Sports about these early offensive struggles, listen carefully to the response.
We're just going to keep working. You know, we know that we're not defined by the first possession of a football game or the first 15 minutes of a football game, for that matter. Probably more times than not, you're more defined by the last possession of the game or the last 15 minutes. And so, you know, oftentimes we spend a lot of our time and energy in terms of growth and development in those areas. And, you know, we'll keep working in some of the areas that you mentioned.
Did you hear that? He's saying it to you. He's saying it directly to you. Now, this isn't the worst stance that a coach can take. This is a coach who's gotten a lot of his W's over the years by having teams or quarterbacks or even coordinators and coaches who were really good at coming up big in the biggest situations. Those are almost always in the second half or the fourth quarter or even the final drive. And good for him for that. And good for him for acknowledging that it contributes to this. But this is where it now goes to Smith. Because this mentality that it's okay for the offense to just eat clock in the first half, it helps keep the Steelers' defense off the field, helps keep the other team's offense off the field. And it ends up giving the Steelers ultimately, by the time the second half comes around, all kinds of advantages, especially if they pound away on the run, even if they don't get any yards. The reason that I point to Smith on this is because Smith himself would want me to do that, because it's a Smith thing. He believes in it. He believes firmly in it. He believes in running just to run. But my respectful counter to that would be that you can still log a whole bunch of runs by setting them up properly. Because guess what? You stay on the field longer if you get first downs. And it's okay to get first downs in the first half or even the first quarter. You can do that. you can use the pass to help set up the run. Now, we've seen some more of that from the Steelers of late, not with any great successes, but some. You've seen, 1st and 10, first possession, and you're 1,000% convinced it's just going to be turned around and hand it to Najee Harris, and instead Russell Wilson will look around and try to make a play happen. Those just haven't happened. That's why I say that some of this obviously is on the players. But that doesn't mean you don't do it. That doesn't mean you stop doing it. From my perspective, what I want to see more than anything is the sticks move. The sticks move, you're serving all masters, okay? You are getting the time of possession that you want. You're holding the other team off the field. And you're also getting yourself more runs to wear the other guys down. It helps everything. And you know where I'm going next, right? Yeah, throw it to the tight end. Throw it to Pat Freiermuth more than 3 times in a game. All he does is catch everything. I don't care what the other team's defense is doing to stop him or to prevent him or where they're loading up in the middle of the field, because I've watched Freiermuth with my own eyes through training camp and practice, catching all different kinds of routes, including a ton of out routes, tons and tons and tons of out routes. Great. Throw those. My goodness, they'll never see it coming. When we come back, J1Q. This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar. Today's J1Q comes from Michael, who says, DK, TJ Watt sustained a knee injury shortly before the most recent playoffs, and although the outcome in Orchard Park might not have changed, it undoubtedly influenced the Steelers' game strategy. At what point should the Steelers consider resting key players such as TJ and Cam Hayward, potentially forfeiting a top 2 seed if necessary? In this era, Michael, of game management, and that's a term that's really come up more in the NBA than anywhere else, though it's also existed in Major League Baseball for some time. You're seeing athletes, even elite athletes, super crazy, highly paid athletes, being sat, rested. It's usually on the road, so you don't rip off your paying customers, but they'll just say, listen, we only want you playing 90% of our team's games, because it shows, the math shows, the analytics show that you're a more effective player, especially as you get older, if you're playing less often. And you're also, of course, limiting the risk of injury, obvious reasons, right? Okay, so there's no way for me to say this without sounding, like I'm stuck in some time warp from 3 decades ago or whatever, but so be it. I don't like this. I think there are certain situations where you can take it easy on older players, elite players. A lot of that has to do with practices. The players themselves will tell you they would much, 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 much rather miss practices, really as many as they can, rather than missing games. They'll also tell you that missing practices has a big impact on their ability to rest and recover fully. And I don't have to wonder, with the 2 examples that you cited, TJ and Cam, how they'd feel about it. Because in addition to the very obvious element that they'd want to be out there for their teammates in every situation, these are also some pretty proud individuals who are putting up some pretty impressive numbers, both of them arguably qualifying for the DPOY conversation this year. TJ likes his sacks. Cam's got 8 of them himself. If you're going to give either of them a break, you do it in the middle of the week. But, Michael, you can take this concept into infinity, and you can drive yourself nuts with it, especially as it relates to injury prevention. By every accounting, for example, George Pickens' hamstring was pulled when he got out of bed last Friday. Not in a game, not even in a practice. Stuff just happens. And if you concern yourself too much with it, you're going to take away the focus that you need, as a coach, as a coaching staff, and of course the athletes themselves, for being best prepared for the next game on the schedule. So I'm trying to set logic into this instead of just saying, well, this is how things ought to be because this is the way things have always been. If the Steelers make it into some sort of position, and I'm not predicting or assuming anything here, where, let's say, for example, the last regular season game, which is at home against the Bengals, doesn't mean anything to either team, I mean, we know it won't mean anything to Cincinnati, then yeah, go nuts. That's just common sense. But to do it now? No. I appreciate the question. I appreciate where you're coming from, Michael. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. And don't forget, we've got a double shot of Steelers coming your way this afternoon with a 4:30 p.m. premiere.